Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 91 of the Home Games Podcast. I'm Yazeed, and this is Joseph.
Hello, I'm Joseph. Making sure this is actually episode 91 real quick. Today is Monday, September 27th. Pretty sure it is. Keeping it rolling. Today we're talking about some Squish updates and some thoughts I had on backwards compatibility and the structure of home games and some other stuff on TypeScript and the stuff that Yazeed had been working on over the past couple months. Just reprioritizing things, and I had a bit of a existential crisis and breakdown, which I'm sure will come up at some point. Yazeed, back to you.
So on my side of things, like Joseph said, we did have a conversation this week about reprioritizing the conversions to TypeScript and when we merge those in and stuff like that. Mostly it's that we wanted to merge it in like in lockstep, I would say. So like the TypeScript conversion for core, web, and Squish happens pretty much simultaneously, because with them comes quite a bit of changes. So that's what I would say on that. I don't know if you want to add anything else to it.
Yeah, basically, the we have other changes that we want to make to stuff in addition to TypeScript, and I think ultimately it just makes more sense to have everything implemented and then convert it to TypeScript instead of trying to do both at the same time, which I think is probably one of the most important things for us to just kind of prioritize or focus on when we're doing this, since we're just us basically just making things make sense and scheduling things when they make sense and focusing on what needs to be focused on, I guess. So anyway, I still want to do TypeScript before the end of the year, but I think we should put it closer towards the end of the year when we have this other kind of stuff that we're thinking of more fleshed out and done.
Agree. I mean, on my side of thing, basically I started working on, I called it TypeScript conversion, but really it's some of the cleanup on the Home Games website of things. I am probably going to just do a conversion on it already, and then when we make changes, whatever changes happen there, the TypeScript changes would have to happen on top of them. But that's okay. At least I know then what we need to do for it. And then along with that will come the README too. Since last time the README on Squish was based on a TypeScript conversion PR, I think what I'm going to do is do a separate one where there's just a general, like, I read through Home Games Web, cleaned up a couple of things, and then wrote a README. And then the second part would be, here's the TypeScript conversion. And then if you're making any additional changes, the TypeScript conversion can be held back.
Sure.
And then the thing too with it is, once the TypeScript conversion is set up, we can double check that it would work with Squish once that's set up. So in theory, everything should be functional, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess just to kind of provide some more context, the reason that this whole thing is being planned like this is because we had TypeScript changes for Squish.js, which again is kind of like the core of everything. Everything references libraries in Squish.js. So for Home Games Web and Home Games Core to continue working, they would need to be able to use the new like TypeScriptified Squish. And basically when you try to do that with our existing stuff, there's some kind of things I don't think that we know how it works yet, or like why it's not fully working or whatever when everything is bundled up together. So instead of trying to figure that out, we're just saying, okay, well, we can keep some of this stuff going and kind of, like Yazeed said, working on it while other changes are happening, kind of just rebasing along the way. But basically, yeah, like I said, focusing on what needs to be focused on. So ultimately, like making everything work with TypeScript is like pretty low on the list of, like why the fuck doesn't this work? I'd rather just have everything bundled up, done at the same time, like one clean break from not TypeScript to TypeScript.
Yeah, I think that would be pretty nice too. And on top of that, with having documentation on anything right now is kind of helpful, because I imagine having at least a README that's written for Squish will be beneficial to somebody somewhere.
Sure, yeah. Just for people who are interested in the project or whatever, who need something more than like a robot telling them how the functions work, like having a human being tell them this is what the point of this is helpful.
Yeah. Well, I mean, currently the README in Squish is
like a robot did it. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll say like a robot did it.
Well,
and it's not just this is how you start it. All right, see you later.
Well, basically, it's like, yeah, it's like what I keep saying. Where how are you going to give instructions to someone and you don't even know what it is yet? You know, so, and then that stuff gets so stale. Like I've mentioned this before, but that wiki that I wrote at this point is useful for the wiki that I wrote a couple years ago that has kind of a general overview of the project. At this point, is so stale because the ideas and the goals that I was talking about are like, oh, it should be multiplayer focused, and oh, it should work in a browser, oh, whatever. That stuff is still there, but any specifics are fucking stupid now because it doesn't. It's not even the way that it works anymore. So that's what it's been. And I keep saying like, oh, you know, it's finally whatever. But I do think this is the one where, you know, when we rewrite it and we have it done and we have it TypeScriptified and we have it clean and we have it like documented and working, then I feel like at that point that's a V1. And we say, okay, this is V1 of Home Games release, whatever, stable. Really, really not like me not believing in it and putting like 0.062, guys. It's very far away from V1 or whatever. Like, no, like saying this is V1, you know?
Yeah. I did have one more question on that. For our services that are a little bit more disparate, maybe is the word. Just like less
standalone microservices?
Yeah. Standalone microservices. Should we go through and TypeScriptify those while these other things are happening and getting documentation out for them? Or are those things that like other people really shouldn't care or worry about unless they really wanted to be a contributor?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess we should deprioritize the TypeScriptification of that stuff because, like you said, yeah, people don't really need to know. That's not the stuff that they would need to interact with directly. They would just kind of use the services through the UI and that kind of stuff. So probably low on the priority list, you know, like for sometime next year, whatever, would be to convert that stuff and document it properly. But at the moment, it's kind of just something secondary.
Okay. Well, the reason I was asking about that was the like my side of the going over the code and writing a README and making a couple of changes to the Home Games web will probably finish next podcast, so 2 weeks, and then probably 2 weeks after that I would probably have the TypeScriptification. Honestly, I might have that done like in 2 weeks too. So then I would basically be like looking for something else to do. So I was thinking like maybe looking through those services and just seeing like if I can do anything there. Because I've never seen the code for most of them or done anything with any of them.
How about, let me ask you what you think either would be the most interesting for you to work on or like the least known for you to work on or most interesting, or like, I mean, you can do whatever the fuck you want. You can do like investigation of WebRTC stuff. You can do whatever you want. You know, we don't have like, this is part of the problem and also kind of part of the great thing is that we don't have a person who cares about the schedule. That's my fault, but like ultimately I can't really see more than a month ahead, and I try to, and I never really work. So I'm kind of just in this like fucking weird phase of this whole thing. But yeah, what would you like to work on?
I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty open to most things. I'd be okay with like helping you do like the stuff you're about to talk about, or looking at the microservices, or doing research into other things. Like, but basically, like this next 2 weeks, I'd be locked into the Home Games web, and then afterwards, I'd be looking for something. So we don't have to answer that like right now and right here, but I'll put that out there as I am willing to put my time into something that's going to get us the furthest ahead. Basically, I'll be flexible. I am flexible.
Okay, so I've been writing unit tests for Squish while I've been rewriting stuff and reforming stuff, and one of the things I'm learning, not just in home game stuff but in real life as well, is that testing, not quite test driven development, but just being able to build basically the interface of a method and code and whatever before you write it, and how it should work with a test and whatever. So I guess test-driven development, but I don't like the terminology. Whatever. Unit tests are important.
Just like, I'll explain test-driven development, but I won't use the word that means that explanation.
Yeah, I guess my point is that I don't like putting the label because I don't like being so strict about it, because not everything is always going to be like that. So, yeah, my point really is just having tests is helpful, and being able to consistently say that these things work when I change whatever is incredibly helpful. Especially when you're refactoring things, which is a problem that we have right now with hardly any tests and trying to reorganize code. It's just hard as fuck because you can move something and you think it works and something else broke and you didn't even realize because you weren't testing that particular function or whatever. And yeah, super shitty. So all of this is to say, within 2 weeks, Squish will have some unit tests, and it'll have probably a pretty rough version of the new structure with maybe some bugs and maybe some ugly code, but pretty much there. Maybe like a draft pull request stuff ready. If you could take that and just like really test the fuck out of it and kind of set up what you think is the right way for us to do tests in the future, because I think, like you've mentioned before, but Squish is probably the best thing for testing because it's a bunch of functions. It's a bunch of just relatively standalone things. So yeah, having solid tests and a solid approach to the way that we do tests as a organization or whatever the fuck this is, if you can kind of do that after, would be super cool.
This collaborative effort.
Yeah, the code commune.
That's right. We're the hippie project.
Yeah, the hippie project. I was gonna say something. It was gonna be a shitty joke.
Yeah, I can do that for sure. It'll be interesting. I'll ask later, maybe.
What?
Do you remember when I asked you about mutation testing?
Oh, when you said a thing that modifies your if statements and shit to make sure that your tests don't give the same results.
Yeah.
Are you trying to build
What if I tried to implement that here? What if I tried to use it? You can say no because I have no idea how hard it is to implement.
That's what I'm saying. Okay. I'm gonna keep it a buck. You want it? I'm gonna keep it 100% real, authentico with you. Like if you wanna, like it seems like you don't know if you want to be like the Home Games research team or if you want to be like the Joseph supplement team or whatever.
I like the Joseph supplement team.
Okay,
I'm cool with being that. But listen, like I said, whatever gets us closer to our own set finish line that moves regularly.
Fuck. Okay. I'm such a mess. Like as a person, it must be. Yeah. Okay.
No, listen, I'm poking fun. I'm not being mean. It's all good.
No, my feelings are incredibly hurt. Now I'm gonna have to explain myself and everything. Okay, so I guess just to quickly recap, these are our goals for the rest of the year for Home Games. It was rewriting Squish to restructure everything to basically be cleaner and nicer and remove all of the hacks that I've added over the course of a couple years. Rewrite Home Games Web and rewrite Home Games Core. Basically rewriting the entire fucking project, except for our microservices, what I called before it's Home Games, like core components or whatever I said. And so that's kind of a mess. And then on top of that, we wanted to convert to TypeScript. So basically it's just code janitorial work, which is not super fun and probably boring to listen to on a podcast. So I guess unit tests are a part of that because when you're rewriting code, like I said, just being able to consistently confirm that you're doing what you think you're doing is helpful. And then once we kind of solidify that, it'll just be the TypeScript conversion. And I think that sounds relatively stable and simple and achievable for this year. I know I've had like 1,000 different goals and I keep going back and forth between them, but that seems like the best version of all that. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Okay. Then yeah, I guess yeah. Then the testing stuff, and then just help me help me get all this shit together once I kind of figure out what that means.
Yeah, that works for me for sure, man.
Cool. Do you have anything else before I go through my things?
No,
Okay.
not yet.
Okay.
I think when I get into, I did a couple of files for the web. I think I have like the big file, like app.js or something like that, which that has like almost the entirety of web in it. So
It does. Yeah, we have like a worker for the socket stuff, and then we have basically all logic for everything in like a big fucking if statement.
yeah,
It's pretty terrible.
So that's what that's literally this next 2 weeks is I'm gonna go through that probably like a fine tooth comb, and maybe make some helper functions that are testable.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I had some things, some kind of follow up from our previous past few episodes, discussions about backwards compatibility is kind of the number one thing I wanted to talk about. And part of my mental breakdown that I've mentioned earlier at the beginning of this episode is that I never think about my goals. I never think about what it like means to do things. I just kind of set goals and then don't hit them, and I know I'm not going to hit them and whatever. So my thing at the beginning was like backwards compatibility is important, and at some point I stopped thinking about what those words meant, and I started just thinking, oh, it's a goal. We have to make sure that our code always works with all the other versions of our code. And then I was thinking, well, how does that work? How does that happen? Like, really, how do we have backwards compatibility game engine code that we distribute to developers and have them available to, pick any version they want and whatever? And so then I realized, well, we're publishing different versions of these functions. Sometimes there's new functions. Sometimes we remove functions in different releases of this thing. That's just an NPM release of a version of a thing. You can depend on it.
Mm-hmm.
You can pull it in. You can use something that you know is there. You can use a different version, do the same thing. That's the whole thing we've been talking about, is just being able to pull in different versions, and like NPM having builds of itself or whatever the hell in the thing that we talked about last episode. And I realized, like, well, we have this thing now, which is the home games repo, which has dependencies on potentially multiple versions of Squish. We can release multiple versions of Squish. So we don't need to care at all about the last version of Squish. We can just do whatever whatever we want. Like if you have a breaking change, it's a new decimal version, whatever the hell. Like there's a standard there, and you just do that. There's nothing. I think I was overcomplicating it and like thinking, backwards compatibility, like someone should just import thing.js and it should always just work with every version of every game ever and do whatever. And it's like, what the fuck am I talking about? It's just it just needs to be available as separate releases. So, and then I just have a note here like, if we had a Squish.js release standalone thing that was just used to basically point to the like canonical versions of home games of Squish that we've released, that serves no purpose to anybody except for us. So why would we release it like that? It's just kind of like using NPM as a hack, which just feels stupid. So I kind of had a moment of clarity sitting in the forest in Pine Top this past weekend, just looking at some trees and shit, and was like, oh god, I'm an idiot. So
this man actually disconnected and then reconnected, and it worked.
It was much needed. But anyway, like I said, backwards compatibility, just had some more thoughts on that, and I think the way that all this stuff works, my note here is kind of the one sentence description of each of kind of the flow of components here. So home games has a game session, which is running a game that depends on a particular version of Squish. So like there's terminology and all that stuff, and everything makes sense, but I think that kind of describes the hierarchy of things. Like home games contains this thing, which is referencing this, which is your game and shit. You know what I mean? Like separating out the components and making it actually make sense, instead of, well, a session has a Squisher, which has a game, which knows it has a session, so then it calls the Squish. It's like that's the bullshit that makes it bad. It's the bullshit that makes it like fall apart. Backwards compatibility will kind of be a part of that when we just have releases of Squish and different games and whatever.
Yeah, I shoot, I had one question on this. When you said that line about Home Games has a game session which runs a game with a particular version of Squish, does that mean that they always have to specify a version of Squish? They can't just say Squish latest?
Yeah, I think we should have them have a specific version of Squish, because latest would be that backwards compatibility thing where we have to support everybody using latest would always have to be able to call their old functions that maybe we wrote 5 years ago that we don't want people to use anymore because they're bad or they're slow or whatever. So yeah, if you built the game when it was bad and slow and shitty and it was version whatever, then cool, use a version whatever. It'll always be guaranteed to be available, like there and shitty. But we did better things after that, so we wanted to stop supporting that. I think that's kind of yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's the biggest thing that'll come from that. No more latest.
So then, I guess, how does that play with the versioning of the games? So, like, if I make a version on version Squish 1, and then I want to up to version Squish 2, I need to make a new version of the game. But is that original Squish 1 version of the game somewhere still?
Yeah, so the version 1 of your game referenced some version of Squish, and it was released and bundled and packaged and whatever, all that stuff, and made available. You wanted to update your game, so you depend on a new version of Squish, call the new functions within it, make sure you update your whole game to do that. When that thing is built, it's tested against that version of Squish and released with that version of Squish. So it'll just be available to it. It's just, in the same bundle.
Okay, and then if somebody wants to stay current with Squish, right? And we release 10 versions of Squish. Now there's 10 versions of the game available?
No, if we release a new version of Squish, it just becomes available in the Home Games release. So games...
Right. But what I mean... I'm sorry, maybe I should clarify the question. So if we put out 10 versions of Squish and they updated their game 10 times, once for each version, there's 10 versions of the game, one for each version?
Yeah, because that person wanted to release a new version for every new feature that we released or whatever. If they wanted to be on the bleeding edge of Home Games tech, then they can do that if they want to. But that's up to them. Like, they can leave their old shit there and not update it ever. And it's using a thing that we released and whatever. You can keep doing it.
I see. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, it's really just up to the developer.
I was just asking for the clarification, but that makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. Cool. And then, I have some notes here. Just game running. Game says I depend on this version of Squish. Yeah, so kind of another benefit of the way that this whole thing is structured now is that you can kind of run a basic...
Hey, real quick, are you listening to your own mic?
No way.
You started to sound like kind of robotic on my side, but I don't know if it's Discord, if it's the mic maybe.
Do I sound different when I'm closer?
No.
It might be the connection.
Okay. Sorry. Didn't mean to distract you, but it was.
Well,
I just wanted to make sure you weren't going to be a robot.
I think I'll only sound shitty to you, because my recording I think should be fine.
Okay.
Or it'll sound shitty. Whatever. We'll see. Anyway, what I was saying is basically now with this new structure of stuff, kind of like I'm saying, where Squish is just a bunch of functions and a Squisher is just a bunch of transformations, basically from one format of data to another format of data, and it's very kind of very testable in that way because it's all just data. So kind of like what I was saying in the last episode, a game doesn't really have a visual state. The idea of screenshotting a game is kind of nuts because the game only exists as data until it hits someone's screen, and when it hits someone's screen, it kind of has a view of it, but it's not really real until someone's looking at it, which is kind of nuts philosophically, But anyway, you can kind of run games in this headless mode or whatever, where there's really no UI for it. It's just make a game run and kind of get it saved at any point and kind of feed inputs to it, and like I said, it's just basically a state machine at that point, just transforming data in and out and checking state. So that seems like kind of a cool benefit of this stuff, and kind of going back to like what I said earlier with the testing, it kind of makes everything testable by nature because it is all just, there's no fuzzy UI thing. Like a lot of people I know complain about automated UI testing because of how finicky it is, where like, oh, I want to click on this button, and then sometimes it takes 2 seconds to load, and my timeout's only 1.5 seconds, and then so it fails sometimes, and I have to rerun the test or whatever the fuck because the UIs are finicky, and ultimately it's like, I just want to test does this shit work? Like, I'm not about the weird stuff that can happen on top. So yeah, anyway, that was just my last little note here of just kind of the structure of everything feels right to me. And it feels like a pretty good setup for the future. I had this thing this past week of like, oh God, why do I still not have games that I want to play? Like, I feel like I've been doing this for 3 fucking years, and I just want to have something done and be happy with it. And then I realized it's kind of like, well, anyway, it's not going to be done ever, and it'll always be an iterative thing. And I guess I just kind of had to refocus and think like, well, this is still happening. It's not not at the pace I wanted, or like not at the state I wanted, or whatever. I just want to rewrite it and make it good, and then we'll be in a better place to kind of build on top of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, quit your job. Ask Sugar Mama to take care of you.
Yeah.
And just make home games professionally.
It's like the Shark Tank shit where they like don't respect you unless you're about to go homeless unless you get the deal. It's like, I'm not going to take that risk, dude. Not at this point. Anyway.
That's how Celeste was made or whatever.
Yeah, but there's like 1 billion not Celestes that we never heard of. And then dude is just like, oh yeah, I went bankrupt and I fucking lost everything, whatever. Anyway, that's gonna do it for us this week. Thank you everybody for listening. As always, our music.
Oh wait, I was gonna ask you what you were gonna work on this coming week, since this was a light episode. So
yeah, this coming week I'll continue working on my conversion of, or my rewrite basically of Squish.js. I have the Squisher working in Squish.js with like a modified version of Home Games Core, so the layer test is working. Still quite a bit of work to do to make like the Home Games frame around the screen work again, and basically a lot of shit that everything that's not the layer test doesn't work right now. So like text support and all that kind of stuff. So basically just finishing hopefully all the Squish stuff, and like I said, having a rough draft pull request in 2 weeks of kind of maybe a buggy, slightly ugly version of what it should be, but definitely there,
Mm-hmm. And I will definitely review it and give you feedback.
Yeah, and I will definitely not merge it until that it's approved.
I feel like one of us definitely was a little sarcastic there.
Oh, definitely.
I'm not gonna point any fingers. I was being legitimate, and I got hit with remember how all those times I'd send you a PR but then merged it anyway? Yeah.
But that's how we got into this clusterfuck. So basically,
not that I could have rescued us, but
Yeah, you're with the bucket on the Titanic, just like an iceberg coming in with garbage.
No, I'm not even gonna try, dude. I'm the violinist on the Titanic, just being like, yeah, boy.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else before I really end it?
No.
Before I really end it sounds. Anyway, that's gonna do it. Thanks everybody for listening. As always,
it's really gonna end it. Sorry, start over.
As always, our music is done by our friend Tynan. He is Nitan on Bandcamp. It is Nitan, Nytan. As always, you can find us on Twitter at HomeGamesIO. We have a website at homegames.io. You can send us a message on the contact form at the bottom of the page, or you can tweet at us, or you can do whatever. Send us a question, comment, feedback, whatever. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.
Bye.